Well, here we are at the Sydney Jones Library, and we're going to go and talk to the law librarian, Lisa Hawksworth, about the equity collection, which is in the law collection on the third floor, and also about how to get the most out of using the library and the resources for equity and trusts. So let's go meet her. Morning. So we've come inside the library, and here, of course, is Lisa Hawksworth, who's the law librarian. You've been law librarian for 9 years, is that?
Yes, since 2007. So I've been at the university for nearly 16 years now in total, but 2007 I took over as law librarian.
Okay, which is great for us because we're about to talk about the law collection. So the purpose of this equity short is for us to think about how the law collection, and in particular the equity materials in the library, can be used to help our study, and in particular how they can be used to help us get better marks in any formative or summative assessment. So we'll talk about the equity collection, and then after that we will talk about just some general points about using the library to get the most out of your studies, really. So Lisa, you've got a range of books in front of you that are equity related. I wondered if first we could talk through the first set of materials that we have, which really is the set text and alternatives.
Yes, so here we've got Pearson Stevens, which I'm sure will be familiar to many of you, and this is the set text. So I guess this really is your starting point for any work that you're wanting to do. And it will signpost you to other resources as well, whether it's case law, articles and so on. But this really is your starting point, the set text, and it will cover lots of different issues in perhaps in some detail, slight detail, perhaps not as much detail as others, but it gives you a range of options, I guess.
So Pearson Stevens, which of course, as you know, Professor Barr has done a separate video equity short, 9 minutes long, for you to look at the ingredients in this excellent book, and of course as we speak he's doing a sabbatical for a year on which he is writing another edition amongst other things, so that's what he's up to at the moment. What about alternatives? So are there any alternatives that you would recommend?
Yeah, sure. The alternative really to Pearson Stevens would be Hanbury and Martin. I'm sure this is on the equity reading list, and that's the key thing to remember really. If that lecturers such as yourselves will always give alternatives, and it's the good students, I guess, the students who want to get the better marks, who will start to read around. If you don't like the style of the set textbook, then there's usually an alternative that you can have a look at, or just something that give you a different viewpoint.
And we have a number of different alternatives. So that's Hanbury and Martin, of course, James Lee down at King's College London, and Jamie Gillister, who's over in Australia. They co-author this. They've taken over from Dr. Martin, whose name still, of course, is attached to the text, Jill Martin, but there you go. This is a very good alternative to the set text if you want to have a look at some different approaches or different views on the same kinds of issues. This is particularly useful as it's got a new commercial chapter in it, a bit like we looked at in Seminar 1 with Quist Close, Fairpack, etc. So that's Hanbury and Martin. But there are others which you can have a look at. So other than the textbooks, Lisa, what other materials are there in the library that a typical equity undergraduate might find useful?
Well, what you find with most subjects really is that you'll start with the textbook because that gives you the overview. But then when you want to explore things in more detail, that's when you'll go and have a look at the monographs, which are essentially books on a single kind of topic or a single issue. So here we've got Equity and Trusts by Alistair Hudson, which is an example, and also this one by McKendrick, Commercial Aspects of Trusts and Fiduciary
Obligations.
Obligation.
Yeah.
I'm not quite sure how you say that. So these are two options, or two examples really, I guess, where authors will look at an issue in much more detail.
Yeah, absolutely. And these are very important for your formative and summative assessment because, for example, this one by Hudson, you're able to look in more depth at specific areas that we examine in the seminars. So, for example, perhaps the three certainties or the nature of equity. You could have a look in here and see what Professor Hudson has to say about that. There are alternatives, of course, as Lisa's just said, like what's equity stirring. That's a nice secondary source to look at as well. And Lisa just mentioned this monograph. There it is. So you can see Emma Kendrick's work. There are an extensive amount of these monographs in the library on equity and trusts, charities, wills, etc., but also obviously other topics. And Lisa is in charge of the acquisition policy, of course, for or the idea of getting books in for the law collection. So if there are any books that aren't in the collection and you think that you would like to see them for your work, do approach either myself or Lisa to discuss acquiring those for our collection. And then you've got a final tranche of books here, Lisa. What are these and how might these help our undergraduates?
Well, these, I guess, are kind of supplementary in a way, but will help students to just kind of broaden their knowledge in general of the development of the law in a particular area. So we have kind of biographies and so on about key players, and the contribution that they've made to equity, and it just kind of, I guess, instead of just giving you the bare facts, as it were, kind of fleshes out the issues and the whole background, the picture really of how the law has actually developed, which can be really helpful for students in kind of aiding understanding, and just a more broader kind of approach really gives you the context, I guess.
Absolutely. So here there's our book plate for the university, and then of course that's this example. So this is this Maitland biography by Bell, and as you know, Professor Maitland taught here in 1883 and 1884 before going to Cambridge to become the Downing Professor of the Laws of England. Very noteworthy historian. Find more about him in this, and of course his course of lectures on equity and other things. So there's that, and yes, of course, as Lisa's just said, there's other secondary sources. This is one of Denning's efforts that you've seen, and then of course there at page 23, the Lord Denning is discussing the infusing of equity. So another source for you to get to grips with. Okay, Lisa, so there's some of the hard copy sources. We've got loads of others. This is just a sample. A very nice collection you've amassed over the last 8 years, and then your predecessors before you. But in addition to these hard copy materials, what else does the library have to offer in terms of materials for the law student?
We've got an extensive collection of online resources, whether it's resources that will give you access to commentary, so journal articles and opinions on the law, to the resources that will actually give you access to the law itself, the case law and legislation and so on. I guess the two resources that students will be most familiar with and perhaps would use most often are Westlaw and Lexis, the two big legal databases. They're very similar. They do the same job but slightly differently. And a lot of the content is unique, but equally a lot of the content is duplicated. You can get on either. So I think really we're very lucky here at Liverpool. We're very well resourced as a library, and there are a lot of resources for students to investigate. And I think sometimes it can be a bit difficult perhaps for law students to know where to start really. And my advice would always be just start somewhere. Your textbooks and the monographs and so on, and the journal articles on your reading list will always be the best starting point. but you can follow up the references in there, look in databases to find those references and so on. And so your research can develop in that way, really.
Yeah. So like springboard mechanisms
Yeah.
off to other sources. Yeah, I agree on the Westlaw Lexis coverage point. I prefer the Legal Journals Index in Westlaw.
Yes.
Seems to be more comprehensive.
Yes,
Is that your
I
view?
think my feeling is that there are certainly more journals available on Westlaw than
Yeah.
there are on Lexis. But having said that, there are also legal journals that are available on neither.
Yeah.
And that's where you could use something like Discover, our search engine, that will pick out the legal journals that are available in other sources as well. So there's no one-stop shop, really. You do have to be comprehensive in your research. You do have to look in more than one place, and that would be the same once you're out of university as well. Once you're in practice or whatever kind of role you end up in. To be comprehensive, you need to be using more than one source.
Yeah, sort of independent, self-starting
Exactly,
research professionals. So we also subscribe, I think, don't we, to Hein Online
We do.
and JustStore. So as again, alternative sources of journals that perhaps might not be on Westlaw.
Yeah,
Lexis.
and they would certainly they wouldn't be on Westlaw or Lexis. Well, there might be the odd title perhaps, but they would be picked up by Discover. So essentially, if a student searches, if they're doing additional research or more resources, if they search Westlaw, Lexis, and Discover, then they're pretty much searching everything really.
Comprehensive.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, that's a neat segue into the next and final part of our discussions here about the library and how the library can help with your equity engagement. And it's this. So are there any general points, Lisa, you want to make about using the library as a typical undergraduate so as to get the best out of this magnificent facility and collection, or any top tips generally for just engagement on your LLB or LLM?
Yeah, well, I think certainly the main point I would like to kind of make really is for students to really make the most of their reading list. Very often students will stick with the key text or the core text and not read any further. You'll get so far if you do that, but you're not going to get the best marks. So everything that's on your reading list should be available in the library, because you shouldn't be on the reading list if we can't actually provide access to it. So it should be quite straightforward to broaden your research really and just do that wider reading. It can be, obviously, it's very difficult to find the time to fit in all the reading, but you have to read a lot when you're studying law. In terms of actually using the library, one thing that I would say with regards to availability of books, because obviously we have a lot of law students, we don't buy one copy per law student because we can't, and that's not what libraries do. What we're here to do is to provide a range of resources, for, as you say, we've seen an example here, a range of resources for students to use. But we do have a reservation system. So if you find that the books you want to use are all out on loan, obviously it can be quite tempting sometimes just to think, oh, I'll just leave it, I'll come back tomorrow. But use the reservation system, because what we have in the kind of, behind the scenes is a process whereby if reservations are on books, we see they're in demand, we buy extra copies automatically. But if there aren't any reservations on the books, we don't know that we need to buy extra copies. We think we've got enough. So I would really stress to students that to use the reservation system if all the copies are out on loan. If you're not sure how to do that, you can just ask at the desk. Or if you try it and it doesn't seem to work, or it won't let you because it says there's a copy available but you can't actually find it on the shelves, then speak to a member of staff and they'll be able to sort that out for you.
Any other general tips or pointers about using the library generally?
Really, we are open 24 hours a day, and I'm not suggesting that students come and study 24 hours a day, but we do get very busy around peak times, around lunchtime. I mean, we're here, it's 9:30 in the morning, there are loads of spaces in the library. So, just try and expand your day perhaps. If you know that you need to come into the library to use resources and you want a nice quiet study area, then perhaps try and get up that little bit earlier and just come into the library at a different time, because it does get very busy over lunch times really. And then the key thing again, about using any of the building or the library resources, if you're not sure, then just ask a member of staff. There are plenty of us around, and we're all here to help you make the most of the resources that we have.
And on that point, of course, Lisa's office, she's going to tell me off for saying this, but perhaps her office is, has an excellent view of the cathedral, I've just noticed, but the Catholic cathedral, that is. But other than that, it's just round the corner from the Law Collection. So I'm sure she has office hours, which we'll put up across the bottom of the screen here. But as she said, other members of staff are also available for queries generally as well. Any other points you want to address? Or
Well, just to say on that, I don't have fixed office hours as such, but students can contact me anytime. If you want to come in, fix a time to come in to talk about, a research issue or anything else really library related, then I'm more than happy to see students. Just drop me a line, or just call in if I'm here and I'm able to see you. Then I'm happy to to see students whenever really.
Yeah. Okay. Excellent. Okay then, so I'm off to put these books back so I don't get in trouble with the law librarian. But other than that, we'll see you in another Equity Short soon. Enjoy the collection, it's a very interesting one. There's lots of different monographs, books, etc. that are unique in a certain sense to this collection. So come and have a look, enjoy your time in the library and your reading. So from myself here in the library, and from Lisa, we say goodbye. Goodbye.
Bye.
That was good timing.